pleasure to be back in Portland. It always is. So many good things go on in this place, such a sense of community and putting people first. I always think of Portland when I think of intelligent public transportation, for example. But especially at this council, which 1991, I guess that means you're 13 years old. I think that's an auspicious age. It's a good age for rite of passage. You're in your puberty. You're growing up fast. And so important this is, more than ever, as things get more and more perilous and dire on this earth. Humans beating up humans, often in the name of their version of God, and humans beating up other creatures as well. And it was such a blessing to walk into this space and hear the drumming and to hear these beautiful songs. And I thank Rod so much for leading the group and leading all of us, because whenever I hear this kind of drumming, I feel the ancestors moving into the space to support us and to challenge us. And I couldn't help but sit there in the front row, looking on the one hand at this circle of tribal drummers, 8 people, and then also at this organ behind me. And the metaphor is right there for all to see. An organ is nice, but it's a modern instrument that is, it really came to its own in the modern era. And it's not very portable. And it takes years and years and years to be able to play one. Only a few people can play one. And when you hear it, it has this beauty for sure. It touches us. But my impression of an organ has always been that it touches you kind of from the heart up. It's very, it's quite heady and intellectual and mathematical. But the drum is so different. It's so portable. And you don't need years and years and years of training to do it. And you don't have to sit without coughing to listen to it. You know what I mean? And you can do it outdoors, indoors, in the rain, dressed, undressed. And it takes you into your first chakra, not up into the head. It takes you down. And that is where our species has to recover its strength today. Because the reason we are in such trouble is that we have cut ourselves off from the earth and the spirit that is integral to earth. And we've been playing around in our heads far too long. Just a month ago, I met a Native American who said to me, "Only a madman thinks with his head." Only a madman thinks with his head. Well, let me expand that a bit and say only a mad civilization thinks with its head. We have to learn to think again with all our chakras. And the drum helps us profoundly to take us back to the source, to the first chakra. Because you know the first chakra, which is located where our tail is or was, which is why we need the 4-legged ones so badly, because they still have their tails intact, see? And the tail is an antenna. So the first chakra is about picking up the vibrations, the sound of the universe. And what we now know about atoms is that every atom is making sound. It's dancing, it's vibrating. So the drum takes us there. The drum takes us to that first chakra, which is where we need to go to renew ourselves and redeem ourselves. And it means our whole civilization has to go there. Our children have to be instructed differently in school so that all their chakras are educated, including the first chakra, and not just their head chakras. Thomas Berry, called himself a geologian and one of the real prophets of our time, true defender of the earth and her creatures, says that most of the destruction on the earth today is happening at the hands of people with PhDs. So what this shows is that heady education alone is a big part of the problem. There's a Celtic saying that says, "Never give a loaded gun to a young man who's not first learned to dance." And I think that it's not just a gun that is a loaded weapon, but I think a PhD is a loaded weapon. I think an election to office is a loaded weapon. The presidency is a loaded weapon. And we should not give it to anybody who's not first learned to dance. And what does that mean, first learn to dance? It means that dancing is where we learn the joy of life, the reverence for life, and the celebration of community for the gift of life. And until we've learned to celebrate life, we are not in a position to wield healthy or significant power. Now, our grandfather Rod talked about warriorhood. And what I want to talk about tonight is the need for us to grow as a species, to move beyond this adolescent stage where we have, I think, in many respects, retreated for the last few centuries, and to become adult and aware again on this planet. And just listening to Rod and his brief comments, his powerful language, the language of talking about the nations of the four-legged ones, encountering the nations of the two-legged ones. We're not even there yet. We're not back to that consciousness yet. We still talk about the United Nations, and we're thinking, of course, of only two-legged nations. And even that, half of the country wants to withdraw from the United Nations. What we need is a United Species organization, where all the four-legged ones, those nations, get represented again. This is part of the wisdom of Native American awareness and indigenous awareness, really, around the world that we need so badly today. And that's what I want to talk about, the whole movement of interfaith, what I call deep ecumenism, which is so essential for the survival of our species. The former Assistant Director of the United Nations, Robert Mueller, who some of you have no doubt heard about, a very wise man in his 80s, he started the Peace University in Costa Rica after he left the United Nations. I was speaking to him this past year, and he said, if you look around the world, most of the wars happening in the world today are religious wars. He said, I think the biggest obstacle to peace in the world is religion. So this is part of where we have to grow up. We have to move away from this notion that my God is here to beat up your God or your goddess, that my God is better than your God, as if what? As if there's a multiple godliness going on. But to do this, we have to be very aware, because the Dalai Lama says that the biggest obstacle to interfaith is a bad relationship with one's own faith tradition. It's a very powerful and wise insight. The biggest obstacle to interfaith is a bad relationship with one's own faith tradition. And that's where I've been working the last, 30 years or so, to try to recover within my faith tradition of Christianity and its mother, parent, Judaism, the tradition that is earth-centered, that finds spirit in matter and in earth and in this world, which we call the creation spiritual tradition. And I am happy to say at this tail end of my career, that scholars are beginning to get it, not because of me, but the latest scholarship about the historical Jesus is all about how this guy was a peasant. This guy grew up in Galilee, which was like the Wisconsin of Israel. I'm from Wisconsin, I say that in all humility. But it was the farming area, it was the green part of Israel. And he was from that, and that's why he was not literate. He didn't do a lot of book reading. And in fact, he was expelled from the synagogue because they thought he was illegitimate as a kid. So while others were praying in church, he was doing the indigenous thing. He was praying in nature. Native Americans don't need churches, neither do Aboriginals and indigenous people. They haven't lost the awareness and the intensity of the intimate experience that all of nature is a temple. All of nature is a sacred place. And so Jesus was developing this wisdom tradition of Israel, which is the earth spirit, the creation-centered tradition that's in the Bible, but has been ignored in seminaries for centuries. So there are such profound links when you look hard at your own tradition between the wisdom of Judaism, of Christianity, and of indigenous peoples, which of course is tens of thousands of years older than that of the people of the Bible. But this is a time we're living in when Muslims and Christians and Jews, all people of the Bible, and the other world traditions, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, the goddess religions, the Celtic, the African, and the Native American and other indigenous wisdom traditions, we have to gather our wisdom because our species needs all the wisdom it can get. It's not a question of my wisdom being better than your wisdom. We need all the wisdom we can get because we have so much knowledge as a species today that we're on the brink of collapsing the very systems on this planet that make our species and so many others sustainable. But in all this wisdom that we gather, I think a very special blessing is that of the indigenous, because it is the oldest. And it is pre-book. And somehow, I don't know, the more I listen to the fundamentalists, the more I believe that getting stuck on books is a very dangerous place to be stuck. I think part of the wisdom of being in a sweat lodge is you can't take your book in there. And even if you did, you wouldn't be able to read it because it's dark in there, and you'd mess it up. You wouldn't be able to read it ever again when you left because it would get so wet in the process. There's wisdom in that. Because prayer is not essentially about quoting quotes at one another, beating each other up with books. Prayer is about strengthening the heart. Strengthening the heart. The rest is details.